You can't embarrass them. They got family ties. So because of that, the public don't know who owe national insurance, all these funds. But and I doubt very much that the public can just leave the street and walk in the registry and go into. I did it because I wanted to know. But everyone can do it. So they will tell you. I remember when they were writing it off. The Prime Minister said that these things going back from 1968 because some people didn't pay taxes from 1968 to 2000. And she's saying because of difficulty in finding the document, the records and stuff, that they're gonna write them off because they're not. That was not true. The records are in some big books at the registration department. They were there. They're still there. They don't throw them away. But that sounds good though. If you see, they tell you that and it sounds good. It sounds reasonable because people say, well, so then it's yeah, oh, you can't find them. No, you can find them. They were there on the big table pilot. But they were saying, oh, because we couldn't find the records and stuff, we had to write them off. That's true. Because there were judgments on the High Court against them that they never satisfied. And they keep a judgment High Court is only valid for 5 years. So what they were doing is just renewing them. Every 5 years, renew them. Rather than force them, they just renew them. Renew. And then they say, but one, they can have the source document. That's true. They had the source document. But people believe that. Because it's, as I said, it sounds good and it sounds reasonable. Because from 1968, Lord forbid, you got any documents that you have from 1968? No. But the registry has. Unfortunately, people believe politicians when the politicians open their mouth. Whether what comes out is true or not. And my experience is that most of it is not true.
So what happens? I mean, at the NIS, do they have a debt collection policy? What do they have, like a department that deals with collecting these, the debts that's owing from these business places? Do they have? How does that work?
There's a section called compliance. They ain't got enough of them. Mr. Strickland spoke to them last night when he said that there is one officer for St. Lucie and St. Peter. You know how many businesses are got in St. Lucie and St. Peter? You got one officer to do it when the month come. They're not taking this. They're not taking it serious.
So you're saying this even within the NIS, the structures that are in there, that it's not the structures are not strong enough to go after the non-compliant
That is a
persons.
chronic in the government and government departments. If you look at the Labor Department, as the Barstow who put on the books of Employment Rights Act that a lot of people didn't want. Even the unions didn't want it because it didn't allow them to grandstand and bully people. You had to prove what you were doing. So the unions didn't like it either. But they did not put anybody in place to police the legislation. Or, for instance, let me give an example. You have a Employment Rights Tribunal, 9 people. But 3 people at a time can hear cases. Only 3. You got a lawyer and 2 other people, one from the employers and one from the workers' side. And they will sit down and they will hear the case and make a judgment. You want to know why you couldn't get your cases, people cases going on 5, 6, 7, 8 years? Nothing to do with the tardiness of the employers at the Employment Rights Tribunal, you know. There was one, I understand that they make a little change now. There was one lady who used to be the subscription clerk and secretary all in one. So she could only service one tribunal at a time, one panel at a time. So 2 cases cannot go on at any one time. And we were crying out for years, and government knew it. They did nothing. They didn't put any resources behind the tribunal so they can get the people's business done. This is for poor people that get fired. So they didn't care. And people think these politicians love them. I don't know where they get a madness from. If you had a dog and treated it to be around here,
you have Miss McLean dying with laughter there. Miss McLean, welcome. Good evening. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, and thank you very much. Um,
Listen, listen. You know,
he's correct though, you
mhm.
know. But go ahead because I was listening to Mr. Franklin. As I was holding in the background. But if I might summarize some of what I heard because I wasn't able to join you from the beginning, and
But
I
before you
Mhm,
do, I just want
mhm.
to, as I thank Mr. Franklin, I want to thank you. I want to thank you. You're not hearing, Mr. Franklin? Oh, I don't think he's speaking to her. Okay. I want to thank you for taking the time since Sunday. I know that it's a big sacrifice, but you're doing this for the people. We've come on here. Nobody's pushing any political party or any such thing. We are all here, and you have taken the time and researched, and people are just calling me and telling me that they love the presentations and the offerings of the panel, and I just want to thank you so very much on behalf of the people of Barbados. I want to say thank you. And you can go ahead now.
Well, let me say thank you, and I got a few calls and so on, and it just sent me reflecting. I mean, I cringe when I hear politicians lumped all in, but the unfortunate reality is that we do have issues. But I want to say to Barbadians that it is not by accident I do what I do. You would have been around long enough, Marcia, to probably know the name Wendell McLean. That's one of my former 7 brothers. I'm one of 11 children. And my brother would have given his life for this country. He gave his life for this country. He died a year before he retired as a lecturer at University of West Indies. Um, and anybody know he spent 30 plus years challenging utility companies around here. And I told people he left 2 things to me. I would never forget. And sorry that I'm talking about myself, but I guess this whole exercise sent me into a very reflective mode. And I remember when my brother got married. I remember when I did his preparing to his eulogy, my sister-in-law said to me that when my brother indicated he wanted to marry her, he told her upfront Barbados was first. And that, to my mind, is indicative of the commitment that he had to this country. So when I do this, it has nothing or very little to do with politics, but to do with the need to fight for the rights of Barbadians. I've been listening to what has happened, and I'm happy to see, happy and sad in a way, to see that the Senate did not meet today. What I find extremely interesting, but it also is not unexpected, based on what we saw take place in the House. What I find interesting is that the Senate, according to Senator Lisa Cummins, who would have called for the adjournment or the rescheduling. I'm not sure which if it was an adjournment or the ended the sitting to come back, but she indicated that they were having some internal consultations as the Senate, the government senators, I believe. And then later on, somewhere in what I was hearing today, I heard that there was supposed to be a meeting of senators with government senators with the consultant at the National Insurance Scheme. And I think that is instructive and it should be spoken to, because when I spoke about process previously, what I was talking about is the whole need for proper preparation
Mhm.
as senators go to deliberate, as members of the House of Assembly go to deliberate. There's been a tradition, which I suppose I would say a long-standing tradition, where the parliamentary group come together and um, they have their discussions, they dissect bills and so on. And I can tell you what happened. This used to happen in our case on Monday nights because Parliament traditionally meets on Tuesdays
Tuesday. Mhm.
and Senate meets on Wednesday. And so you talk about the legislation that is coming, you make sure you understand the issues and so on. So what I found perplexing was the fact that you are now meeting as Senate to hear from a consultant to the NIS. So my question was, and I will say this, I can bet you, and I said it, I talked about betting last night. I can bet you that if we did not have this if you didn't have this program and had three evenings of the discussions for the public, the Senate would have met and that bill would have been passed today. I am sure before sunset, the senators would have completed their business and gone. And I say that I'm not a mathematician. My sister is, my brother was, other members in my family are not me. I'm not a mathematician, but the law of probability, when I look at how the previous sittings have been taking place, what I've seen is that they meet and they end pretty early. So I believe that they would have gone ahead and this matter would have gone and so on. So I am happy to say that perhaps now, when we hear from the Senate next week, we will hear a proper debate, because somebody spoke about speeches yesterday because there's no opposition in the House, but we have independent senators, and I trust that they all will sit down and do a serious analysis of these two bills, and whether they choose to use the same strategy as the House and debate them as one debate, that adequate time be spent on those. Having said that, I want now to comment on what I heard when I joined the program, and you were talking about lack of compliance. I made a couple notes here. Issues of failure to enforce, the problem with judgments made by the court or the tribunals. And it set me to thinking. Recently, I was speaking to a relative, and Caswell keeps referring to poor people, because the truth is national insurance is about workers. It's about, providing support for workers. So whether it is your pension, whether it is unemployment benefits, whether it is dealing with severance, all of these things speak to the finances that workers get, whether in the form of salaries, as in the case of severance arrangements are put in there. Things are put in place to protect workers, because an individual worker or herself is not in a position to, stand up against an employer, a large company, even a small employer. The balance of power is not in the favor of the employee. And therefore, that's why they have unions. That's why there are laws. That's why there are certain provisions made to protect them. But, I asked myself, where are we now? And I'm using my strategic management jargon and model of thinking and discussing it. Where are we now as a national insurance scheme? Because before we can talk about making changes, I think it is absolutely critical that the public be engaged, and this happened in the past and it should continue, engage in looking at what is the situation with the scheme. And as I said, if you were doing a strategic analysis, one of the first questions to answer, where are you now? What is happening? And clearly from what we heard, there is a lot of inefficiency, a lot of significant evidence of the failure of the institution, I would say the management. And I challenge any of the senior managers to tell me that I am wrong. It is the failure of the man. Because we like to talk about politicians, and politicians have a responsibility, but a politician doesn't go into the national insurance scheme or in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where I worked for 10 years, almost 10 years, and tell a PS or a CEO or a director or whatever what to do on a day-to-day basis. I can't go and tell the permanent secretary to go write a check. I couldn't go. My former colleague, Caswell, made reference to Esther Basuku. She was our Minister of Labor at some, for the most of the time. She was Minister of Labor. She couldn't go and tell the former head of National Insurance what to do. In fact, I wouldn't tell you what he used to tell her, because I don't think but he would know the level of support and otherwise, but she couldn't go and dictate to him or what to do on a day-to-day basis. The administration, the implementation of policies and so on fall in the lap of managers, supervisors, etc. So while we as at a policy level, a minister and a cabinet and a government, they have to provide the resources. These resources have to be adequately used. They also have to indicate where additional resources are needed, etc. And the truth is, when we look at this in terms of compliance, we heard last night about from Mrs. Strickland and from Mrs. Moon concerns about what happens on a day-to-day basis. So before we start going to increase, and I'm going through a long route because I think we need to flesh these things out. So before we start going to say we're going to increase contributions or we're going to reduce benefits, and because the population is shifting, yes, but if we allow inefficiency, we are not making the best use of the monies that we collect. We're not making the best use of the staff that we pay. And therefore, I would say to government, tell us what you have sought to do before you start to introduce these changes. And I would hope that somewhere captured in the term used was revitalization. I'm looking for the minister's statement. The description was, I think it says the revitalization of the national insurance scheme. The minister on the revitalization national insurance scheme. So before, as we seek to revitalize, before you get to telling me where you're going and what changes you're going to make, give us solid information on how you have evaluated the persons you've paid. What is their diagnosis, in other words? Beyond the population shifts and all of these things, the reduction in workforce or whatever, tell us how well you are managing what you are required to do right now. Because I can tell you, based on all that I heard last night and the bit I heard just now, that there are a lot of things that are not being done properly. And therefore, if you can tighten these things up, then you are going to be in a better position to say to Barbados, the problem that we really are facing is 75% of it has to do with a decline in the population and the shift in the payments that we are likely to receive and whatever. But when you're going to tell me that there are people out there owing the national insurance scheme hundreds of millions of dollars, and I used myself last night and I will repeat it. When I left the university in 1999 teaching full-time, so that's a long time ago. I, as a young woman, we decided that some of us, my relatives and a couple of friends and so on, went into business. And there was one business I was involved in. And as I said, because we were slow in paying the benefits on behalf of the employees, the chairman at the time, because he knew me and he knew where I worked, and I would have to go back and see whether it was done according to lawfully or whatever, garnished my salary. I was a young woman, single, working. I didn't have my son, that was long before he was born, but I was working in the university system, and they knew that I had a regular income as an employee. But I was also trying to use my resources to create opportunities for some people to work as well. But I ran afoul of the NIS in terms of the promptness with which I was paying deductions. They didn't come and ask me how the business was doing, but they figured you got money somewhere, you're going to pay. Why is it that large corporations or individuals who are high net worth persons can get away? And then you come with, as Caswell said, with the nonsense of saying you don't know who is owed. When in fact, one of the beautiful things about the systems that we have had as a country over the years is the records and the files and so on. I tell people, unless somebody seeks to actively destroy your file, once it has not been badly stored and so on, I took the time in many instances when files were brought to me as a minister to go and go back on the file to get a sense of issues. So I might have a file with information going back to the 80s in 2017 or 16. But I could check the information. So this notion about lack of records and so on. So my point I wanted to make, and I took a while at making it, is that before we even go to telling people we're making these changes, and now you come and say, well, they're going to be coming 10 years down the road, or not in the distant future, or not too soon. Because that is the case, there is no reason to tell me that you do not have time to look to fix all the kinds of problems that we have been hearing. And tell us, once you fix those things, hire compliance officers, one person for St. Lucie and St. Peter. Caswell, what kind of salary would that person be making per year? A compliance officer.
You have to unmute, Mr. Franklyn.
Unmute.
I don't have the information here with me.
All right, well, let me use a figure. $50,000 a year. Okay? That might be, I don't know what level in the scale that the thing is, but let's use $50,000 a year. We have 11 parishes. If we had one officer per parish, or two, you can realize that one officer, that'd be 11 by 50, that's $550,000, I think it would be. $500,000 for one. If you double it, it would be $1 million. You're talking about an organization which is handling billions of dollars. Why is it that you don't recognize that if you have efficient compliance operations, with officers following up and so on, not only are you getting people to pay it, but remember Ms. Eastman spoke last night about being visited as a young attorney and being encouraged as a self-employed person. So my point is, I'm saying is, you're not only talking about recoveries, but you're talking about a relatively small investment in personnel, in staff, to do a number of things. So my point, I will quit here, is show us the extent to which you have been able to improve operations, to reduce the loss or the inability to collect revenues and these kind of things, to get people to participate as they're supposed to. And then let's start talking about the impact of that and the extent to which that will reduce the necessity to take some of the decisions that you're proposing.
Well, and I think that is so important, because if your compliance structure is not strong enough, what's the point? Because it's going to happen again. If you don't, you're going to have a way of how you're going to get the debt, how you're going to get people to pay. What's the point? You're collecting more money, and we're going to go back into the same old system. Someone, I see people asking, so what's next? And before I allow Miss Eastman to share her thoughts on the announcement today, I want to hear her thoughts about the senators not doing anything today with the bill. I want to say that one of the things that happened on this show, because we don't just stop, but we there's action. The first thing that happened right here on the show is that Mr. Franklyn said, let's do a sick out on Wednesday. And some people wrote me and they said, why Wednesday? Let's do it Thursday or do it Friday. But as I saw what was happening today, I know that it put a bit of pressure on these people. There was pressure on them. There was talk in the news. Even this evening, it came up in the news again, because people were wondering what was going to happen. Employers were wondering, and they said, well, a lot of people didn't follow suit. A lot of people came to work. But the point is that I believe that it allows, it says that the people mean business. It really, really, really made a statement. The other thing idea that came up in our discussions was that there be a petition. And I want to I didn't get the permission to say the person's name, but they have already worked up the contents of the petition that I am sending, to a couple people to just read over. And then you're going to have that opportunity. Everybody will have that opportunity to read the petition and decide if you want to sign the petition. You will see what it's all about. And then the third thing that came up, and people have been talking about it in the comment section, is about hitting the streets. And today we were able to go down to the police, because we're not joking. We went down to the police and handed in a letter, all right, seeking permission for a protest march on Saturday. Now, we don't know if it's going to come through by Saturday, but based on my understanding, Miss, the lawyer in our midst can let me know if what I'm saying is true or not. But based on my understanding, you just really need 2 days. It's really 2 days that you need to in terms of applying for that permit. So that letter has gone down to the police, and if all goes well, then we should be on the street on Saturday. Why is it important to go on the street on Saturday? Because they said they're going back there. The Senate is meeting on Wednesday. And I know that they respond to pressure, and we're going to pressure them. Somebody wrote on my page and said, when you put pressure on in the pipeline, they burst. And you gotta keep applying pressure. Miss Isma, do you think those senators were feeling the pressure of the people of Barbados? Why the whole thing was adjourned? Good night.
Well, good night, and good night to the panel. Good night to everyone. I listened to what the leader of government business in the Senate said, and if you can, the gist of it was that we're not going to discuss the bills. That's the only thing you could really get from it. But she said that there are a number of considerations. And in fact, this is what she said, that there were a number of considerations, that there was going to be a separate internal meeting of the Senate to deal with matters preparatory to the bills which are coming before the Senate. Now, so then someone said to me, so what, they're going to debate the bill in private? Because, what does it mean? What does it mean when she says that the Senate is going to meet privately to do what? Strange. The Senate usually meets to do the business of the people of Barbados. I would see the Senate meeting if it had some issues with its procedure or something like this. She's not talking about going into committee. So it was a rather odd statement. And it is unclear really what it meant. What considerations, what were the number of considerations that she was talking about? So the fact that you had that kind of statement suggests to me that they decided that they weren't going to proceed with the bills because of the pressure which they were facing. And I said this on the last occasion, but they also have the Integrity in Public Life Bill before them as well. I don't want us to forget that, because that was a bill that we were calling for the longest time. It passed the lower house, and when it got to the Senate, it failed. For whatever reason, because that Integrity and Public Life Bill is very important to the people of Barbados as well. So I do feel that they were feeling some pressure. I don't know if you counted how many senators were there.
9.
9?
Yeah.
9 out of
21.
Oh.
A bare quorum.
Oh. But that in itself says something.
But what do you think it says? Miss McLean, your mic was
yeah, I listened to Senator Cummings and I listened again. I think one, the pressure came from the discussions over the last 3 days to tell them what you were planning to do, you could not do. And that was to come in there and as I use the word a sham in relation to what transpired in the House, a similar thing. And it is clear that they were not properly briefed, because I'm not sure if Lynette heard, but she made reference, or somebody made reference during the day, to the fact that they were going to be meeting with the consultant from NIS. Now, you were a member of a parliamentary group, and you know the process of preparation for debates in Parliament. You go after being briefed and prepared, and after discussing as a parliamentary group what are the issues, whatever, the strategies for debating and so on. But clearly, if you, and I say history is a good teacher, if you follow the debates in Parliament, the Senate is different because you have independent voices and so on. There are very few people who speak to most bills. There's never a time that I've heard a majority of the members of Parliament, let's say in the House, or a majority of the government senators speaking to a bill, because you can have a lot of people speaking and introducing different aspects of the issues. So I think, Lynette, the problem was that the pressure was y'all can't go and try to debate the way y'all were planning to get this thing over and pass and Colombo your business. So they now have to go and understand what are the issues. And how. So that's my take on that. That's what I heard.
Yeah, they actually met with the committee with Rawdon Adams, the actuary, director of national insurance, and somebody else. I can't remember who that person was, and they explained the bill to them. I wasn't there, but I have enough information that would allow me to find out these things.
Explain it before or after?
Let's explain the bill to them. They
When?
After the adjournment.
After the adjournment.
Okay. Yeah, after the adjournment. They huddle and they get somebody to come and explain it to them.
And that essentially was
what? If this show was not in place, this thing would have passed and the challenge would have gone there and debate a bill that they didn't understand and that pass it, and nobody will be wiser. So the country owes Marcia Weeks a debt of gratitude. Trust me.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that you have to bear in mind too is that the bills are supposed to pass the cabinet first.
Yeah, but we know that.
No, right. But so you're telling me that these bills, because remember there's a whole process, unless they don't follow the process any longer. There's a whole process where the bill starts from within the ministry. A policy paper starts within the ministry. The first thing you have is a policy paper. The policy paper is supposed to be approved by the cabinet. When that is approved, it then goes to the Chief Parliamentary Council, the CPC, then for drafting. So when you get back the draft bill, well, some ministries would send the bill out or have a discussion with stakeholders or whatever. But then it is the draft bill then goes back to the cabinet for approval. And then it will find its way into Parliament. So these individuals, some of the individuals sitting in the Senate also sit in the cabinet. And as Maxine said, it should have been discussed within the party itself at parliamentary group meeting. So all of those stages would make you extremely familiar with the bill. In fact, you should have had at the cabinet level, especially, and in the parliamentary group, where you have representatives of constituencies